Aliens turn out to just be other humans. Mrs. Sanchez stood in front of her class, the walls of the room projecting images of the vast armada that the Odyssey had encountered. Imagine, class, the surprise and confusion of the Odyssey's crew. They set out to discover new worlds, hoping to maybe find signs of life. Yet, they suddenly find themselves face to face with, well, essentially their distant relatives. Lucas, ever the skeptic in the group, raised an eyebrow. Wait, Mrs. Sanchez, are you saying they were greeted by humans in space? Mrs. Sanchez nodded. Exactly. Picture it, Lucas. The ship's alarms ring out as they exit the warp, indicating the presence of numerous unidentified vessels. Captain Rebecca Harlow orders the screens to display their surroundings, and there they are, thousands of starships, each more impressive than the next. And not just any ships. Human ships. Mia leaned forward, her interest piqued. How could they tell they were human ships from just looking? The teacher smiled, pulling up another image. By the insignias, each bore the emblem of the human galactic empire. It's a beautiful emblem, resembling our old Earth but surrounded by constellations that, until then, were foreign to us. So, like, Earth had been spacefaring before and just forgot about it? Lucas questioned, clearly trying to wrap his head around it. Seems that way, Mrs. Sanchez continued. Before Captain Harlow could even process the situation, a transmission came through. The face on the screen was human but adorned in regal, otherworldly attire. That was Commander Aileron of the HMS Legacy. He welcomed them rather formally to the heart of the human galactic empire. Jenna's hand shot up. But why weren't they hostile? I mean, a random ship appears out of nowhere. Good question, Jenna, Mrs. Sanchez replied. Commander Aileron explained that Earth, or Terra as they called it, was once a colony of this vast empire. It was lost during the chaotic times of the intergalactic wars. They had myths, legends about the lost colony, and now, suddenly, here was a ship from that very place. They must have felt like they were meeting ghosts, Mia whispered, a hint of awe in her voice. Quite possibly, Mrs. Sanchez agreed. Captain Harlow, meanwhile, was trying to grapple with the reality that the history of Earth was not as she knew it. There were gaps, secrets, and mysteries that were now coming to light. Lucas seemed frustrated. But how could we forget? We have records, history. Wouldn't someone somewhere have remembered we came from the stars? Mrs. Sanchez leaned against her desk, her face contemplative. History has a way of being lost, Lucas. Think of the ancient cities buried beneath the earth, the tales of old that became mere myths. Over generations, especially if there's trauma or a deliberate attempt to hide the past, truth can become legend, and legend can fade away. But why would anyone hide our spacefaring history? Jenna inquired. That's a mystery in itself, Mrs. Sanchez replied. Maybe the first settlers on Earth wanted a fresh start, away from the wars and politics of the galaxy. Or perhaps there was a more sinister reason. But with the Odyssey's journey, we were about to rediscover our past. She paused, looking around at her captivated students. And that, class, was just the beginning of the Odyssey's adventure. Earth's history, our understanding of our place in the universe, was about to be rewritten. Lucas leaned back, clearly deep in thought. It's like waking up from a dream, only to realize the dream was real. Mrs. Sanchez smiled. Exactly, Lucas. And remember, history isn't just in the past. We're making it every day. The Odyssey's voyage was a reminder of that. Mrs. Sanchez dimmed the lights as the projection shifted to an image of a sprawling metropolis, buildings reaching for the skies and ships zipping between them. This, she began, is the capital city of Orionis, the seat of the human galactic empire. The Odyssey was invited there after their unexpected encounter. Jenna's eyes widened. It's like a futuristic version of New York. Yes, but on a scale far grander, Mrs. Sanchez agreed. Now imagine the Odyssey's crew stepping onto this world. The sights, the sounds, the realization that this was all built by humans, their distant kin. Lucas pondered aloud. I wonder if they felt out of place, like they were the backward cousins visiting the successful big city relatives. Mrs. Sanchez chuckled. In many ways, yes. While they were treated with respect due to their unique status as representatives of the lost colony, There was an undercurrent of condescension from some of the galactic citizens, but Captain Harlow didn't let that deter her. She and her crew were determined to learn as much as they could. Mia interjected, "But why? If Earth was just a forgotten colony, what did the Empire want with them now?" "The Empire," Mrs. Sanchez began, "had its challenges. Over the millennia, it had grown too large, too bureaucratic. Corruption and infighting among the noble families had left it weakened. The rediscovery of Earth, with its untapped resources and its fresh perspective, was seen as an opportunity. But it wasn't all politics," she continued. "The Odyssey's crew met researchers who were fascinated by Earth's unique evolution after being cut off from the rest of the Empire. There were historians eager to hear about our world's take on events and artists who fell in love with Earth's diverse cultures." Jenna looked confused. "But didn't they consider themselves superior? Why would they care about Earth's history?" "Ah," Mrs. Sanchez replied with a smile, "that's where the story takes an interesting turn. You see, the more the galactic citizens interacted with the Odyssey's crew, the more they came to realize that while they might have had advanced technology and vast knowledge, Earth had something they lacked." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "And what was that?" "Resilience. Determination. The ability to adapt and survive against the odds. Remember, Earth had faced its challenges, from natural disasters to conflicts, yet humanity had always risen, rebuilt, and moved forward. That spirit was something the Empire, in its stagnation, desperately needed." Mia looked thoughtful. "So they wanted to learn from us?" Mrs. Sanchez nodded. "Precisely. And Captain Harlow recognized this. She saw an opportunity for Earth to not just be a passive player, but to take an active role in shaping the future of the Empire." Lucas smirked. "So, we went from being the lost backward colony to potential saviors?" "In a manner of speaking, yes," Mrs. Sanchez replied. "The Odyssey's journey had far-reaching implications. Diplomatic missions were established, trade routes were discussed, and Earth began to be seen as the bridge between the old and the new." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "And that, dear students, is where the real adventure began. Because while the Odyssey's maiden voyage might have ended, its legacy was just taking root." Mia leaned back, a dreamy look on her face. "It's amazing to think that we're all part of this vast, interconnected story." Mrs. Sanchez smiled. "Indeed, and always remember that no matter how small or insignificant we might feel, we have the potential to make a mark on the universe."